Hello. I'll try to adjust the camera here. That's good. Straighten up my mat with your all's view. At least a little bit. If you're joining in, I highly recommend grabbing what you need for your own practice. So some ideas of things that could be supportive might be things like a cushion, it could be a pillow, it could be a meditation cushion, it could be a couch cushion, which I've got my couch cushions back here for later. If you have blocks or even books to elevate the floor to you for certain postures, that could also be beneficial. That being said, no matter what props or things you've got going on, I'll be teaching in a way where hopefully there will be some sort of modification for you to support your practice. So for these next 4 weeks, I am hoping to guide us through little chunks at a time of things that support the healing process from trauma, specifically things that might arise from experiencing domestic violence. This first little chunk of linked practices is going to focus on the different movements that our body can make and how those can support us in moving through active or past domestic violence, trauma experiences. As we move through these practices, I want to encourage you to know that your internal compass, your internal knowing is what I want you to follow first. So if there are times where you're like, this doesn't feel good in my body, this feels like it's triggering, this feels ... If there's any moment where you're like, I want to take something else, I want to do something else, I am fully on board for you making this your own practice. All of our nervous systems are different, and my goal here is to give you some ideas of how to maybe tend to your nervous system. And these pieces, these things aren't going to be 100%. They're going to vary from person to person. So I encourage you to come in with a curious mind, a curious body, and up for a little bit of exploration. That being said, these next 4 sessions are going to focus on different ways we can move our body, specifically through space. And each movement has to do with a different component. So today we're thinking about grounding and lengthening up is going to be our theme for today. And the concept that that's connected to is grounding. If you've ever heard this in the therapeutic context, it means getting in touch with something solid so that you can feel like you can move through something. One of the pieces that can be really common in experiences like domestic violence, where there is prolonged stress going on without like a break for our nervous system, is that our nervous system can go into a place of dorsal vagal activation or collapse. And it can be really hard. We can get stuck there and collapse even when we have safety, even when we have the ability to be away from what is dangerous. So this initial practice is aimed at addressing that dorsal activation, that collapse, and starting to slowly encourage our nervous system to come out of that space. And times when this could be helpful are when you do know logically that you're in a safe space where you have time to let go of that collapse response and to be present. And this practice can be as slow and as small as you need it to be. So as I guide us through some movements, there are going to be times where I'm asking us to like reach out wide, and maybe your reach out wide today is really small. It's just like lifting your arms a little, or maybe it's really wide. And those are kind of the points where you can make a decision in your own nervous system, in your own body of like, how much do I want to embrace this? What am I noticing when I reach out really far? If it feels panicky, if it feels uncomfortable, I encourage you to take it back and just do it as small as you can possibly do it. As we start to encourage our nervous system to come out of that collapsed state, it can be really slow. It does not have to move fast. It does not have to be big. And that's kind of the theme of today's practice, is supporting grounding so that we can start to come out of that collapsed shell that can tend to happen when we have prolonged stress or prolonged trauma responses. I'm hoping by this point in time that if you have wanted to grab props, that you've been able to collect those blocks, blankets, pillows, anything that feels like it supports your practice. As you get into the practice a little bit more, you might notice things that you're like, ooh, I really want this or that. So totally okay if you don't know quite yet either. And we'll actually get today's practice started in a comfortable seat. So you may take a seat with legs crossed one in front of the other. You may take a seat seated on heels with something underneath the tush. Or maybe you take a completely different posture. Just noticing where your body wants to come to in this moment as a starting point. And just letting your body find its natural place. So we're not jumping into a particular shape here, just finding that comfortable seat in your body. I tend to notice that I like to move towards that collapse in my natural seat, letting myself round forward. This kind of cocooning in happens in my own body, but notice what's happening in your body as you encourage it to just settle and land. You can keep your eyes open here, or if it feels okay, maybe you soften and close them. No requirements, though. Now we're going to start to tap into your environment, just taking a moment and noticing what is around you. If you have decided to have your eyes closed, maybe that just means sensing the energy in the space. Noticing maybe the texture of your pants, the texture of your mat, what it feels like to sit into and rest into the earth where you are at. If you've chosen to keep those eyes open, maybe you investigate the room with your eyes, noticing the edges of the ceiling. You could pick a color and see how many things you can name with that color. My space has a lot of green and purple, so I'd like to choose those ones. Just starting to allow your awareness outwards to the things that let you know that you're safe here in this space, in this practice. Knowing that it's okay if maybe there aren't a whole lot of cues for that, but just seeing if you can allow yourself to find something outside of yourself to focus on. As you start to feel comfortable in your space, as you start to land into this space with that awareness, we'll start to bring that attention inward, starting to notice the inhales and the exhales. And as you start to notice those inhales and exhales, we'll start to intentionally elongate them, thinking about breathing into your sits bones, into the ribs, into the chest, allowing that breath in to move you slightly. And then as you exhale, settling into that slightly shifted shape. That inhale into the belly, the ribs, the chest. Maybe you start to notice that air creating a shift in your posture. And then as you exhale from the chest, the ribs, the belly, settling into that new orientation. So the idea here with the breath is breathing in fully, allowing the breath to expand the rib cage, expand the torso, align the spine. And then as you exhale, giving yourself permission to settle into this new alignment. Starting to get in touch with that elongating upward through the sits bones. See if you can imagine that breath coming all the way from the hips up and through the torso, maybe even metaphorically out of the head, pulling you upwards. And then as you exhale, just this little softening into that new shape. Allow yourself to take a couple more rounds of breath here, noticing that sensation of lengthening. And then as you're ready, we'll take one more big breath in. Maybe an audible sigh out if it feels okay. We'll start to open those eyes back up if they have softened or closed. And I'll let the hands land on the knees here, maybe on the upper thighs. If you're in a seat where you're sitting on the shins, your hands will be more in front of you. If you have your knees out in more of a crisscross applesauce shape, they may be up to the sides here. Now that next breath in, I want you to think about that similar lengthening through the spine and just imagine the crown of the head reaching slightly behind you, almost like it's reaching towards that top seam of the ceiling as you gently press your chest and ribs forward. A little bit of arch through the spine here. Notice how much feels good. This can be a really tiny, tiny movement if it needs to be. And then as you exhale, starting with the shoulders rounding forward, begin to tuck that rib cage in towards the hips. This little crunching of the abdominals as you round forward, chin can come to chest. Think about this C shape of lengthening where the hips are reaching forward, rounding really down into the ground, and the crown of the head is reaching forward. So we're not crunching the spine here, but we're reaching in both directions. Big breath in to start to reach the back of the head towards that upper seam of the ceiling. Allow the shoulders and the rib cage to follow. And then exhale to come forward. These are our seated cat-cows here, just exploring that extension and flexion through the spine. Again, noticing what your body is saying to you as you're taking these movements. Knowing that these could be really, really small, really, really almost internal micro movements. Using that breath as a metronome for pace. We'll do about 2 more rounds here. Breath in to find that opening through the front of the body. The head reaches back. And as you exhale, that slight rounding forward, the ribs come towards the hips. Really feeling those roots, those legs, those feet press into the ground. Last one here. Big inhale. Allow that opening to come in. And this time, as you exhale, allow your spinal column to come back through center. Maybe you take a little wiggle from side to side here, just noticing how that lands. Option to take that breath in, that audible sigh out. Next, we're going to inhale, reach the arms out towards the sides. And then as we exhale, we're going to take the right hand and wrap it around like we're giving ourselves a little hug, bringing that right hand to the left rib cage. The left hand wraps over towards the right shoulder, and we're going to bring our ear towards that right shoulder. This is a developmental movement here that harkens back to really young us. So that shape that we might have taken in a caretaker's arms, when we were being held as an infant. I'm going to take a couple breaths here, feeling that stretch through the side of the neck. You might even slightly lean over towards the right, creating a little side bend here. Feeling into the support, feeling that reach of the top of the head over to the side, any amount. And then on your next inhale, we're going to unwind the arms, bring the neck and shoulders back through center, lengthen, lengthen, lengthen through the spine. And then we're going to take it towards the other side. So this time, the left hand wraps towards the right rib cage, right hand grabs for the outer edge of that left arm. We'll start to let the left ear come towards that left shoulder. This might be where you're at, just thinking about lengthening the head towards that seam of the ceiling at the side of your space. You could stay here, or maybe you choose to ground down through both hips and find this little lean over towards the left. Holding this curiosity of what does it feel like to find length in this supported little self-hug. On that next inhale, we'll start to straighten back through the spine, head over heart, heart over hips. Release the arms. You can reach them out really wide or just release them out, and we'll swap over towards the other side. We're going to do this one more time on each side. So this time, right ear comes to right shoulder, grounding through the hips. Maybe on that next exhale, you bring this into a little bit more of a side stretch. Few breaths here. On that next inhale, we'll lift back through center, crown of the head towards the ceiling. Release the arms. Maybe you reach them out wide as you swap over to the other side. That left ear to left shoulder. Take a moment to ground down to find that length. Our grounding allows us to find that integrity, that length in our spine, that sense of buoyancy. And as you exhale, allow yourself to come into that deeper side bend if it feels all right for your body. Inhale to come back through center. You can stay with this variation of this movement, or maybe you experiment with the next exhale, bringing the right hand to the ground. The left arm reaches up and over, finding this more extended length. The length not only comes through the spine, but it comes through the arms, it comes through the rib cage, it comes through the hip. Maybe wiggling those fingers at the top. Breath in to release you back through center. If you've taken either shape, open up wide and then transition to the other side. That right arm reaches up and over. Finding length here, your version of a side bend. You might notice some collapse coming here into the rib cage if your chest is pointed down towards the ground or towards the thigh. See if you can stack shoulder over shoulder, noticing how that feels in your body, in your nervous system. Knowing that we're really exploring what feels good in your practice. There's no right or wrong here, but what is your lengthening? What is your integrity today? Big breath in, back through center. You're going to take an exhale, hands come to the heart space. Taking a big breath in. Maybe that audible sigh out. This time as we inhale, we're going to bring the arms out to the side. We're going to start to twist from that center, from that belly, towards the right of your space. Again, this move can be as little or as large as you like. It might be just this little tiny rotation, or it could be quite large depending on how your spine is feeling this evening. Think about that crown of the head reaching up, the chin tucks in, and then once you've reached that edge of your twist, you can go ahead and drop the hands, bringing one slightly behind you, one to that opposite knee. If that hug sensation felt good, you might even take the left arm and wrap it around to the rib cage and just use that right hand behind you to support length through the spine. Notice your breath here. How is your breath supporting grounding down, supporting lengthening up? On that next inhale, we're first going to release the arms back out, and then from that center, from that belly button space, start to rotate back towards center and over towards the other side as you find your edge, that place where it feels like, ooh, that's where I need to stop. Honor that boundary that your body is giving you, and then allow the hands to rest down to further support lengthening through the spine. So the hands are a grounding agent here. They can either ground into the mat behind you, into your opposite knee, or maybe like that sensation of that opposite hand coming around towards the rib cage and grounding into your own integrity, grounding into yourself. Which with each inhale, engage in thinking about that breath coming all the way from the hips where they make contact on the earth up through the crown of the head. You know, our lungs aren't that large, but metaphorically here, imagine that line of energy. We'll take this one more time to each side, inhaling to release the arms first, starting to unwind, and then as you start to exhale, find your way back over towards the right, landing at that edge and allowing the hands to ground down, whatever that means for your practice today. With that breath, notice how length comes in, how grounding comes in. Maybe you notice something in your room on this side that is that color that you chose earlier. On that next inhale, start to release the arms first and allow that rotation to come through the midsection all the way to the other side. Last time here, allow the hands to ground down. That lengthening breath. Inhale to come back through center, releasing the arms. This time we're going to bring the arms down towards the side so that we can support bringing our legs out in front of us. We're going to do some intentional tuning or collapsing inwards. So it's not quite a nervous system collapse, but it is moving into our cueing our nervous system that we can have some choicefulness in how we rest and when we rest. If you do have blankets or pillows, you can take a cushion underneath the knees here. You might even take just like a blanket underneath the knees. You can also do that without any proper support. We're going to bring our heels in towards our glutes some amount here so that the tops of the thighs are starting to make contact with the front of the belly. And bring our hands underneath the thighs in a way that feels comfortable and just start to round forward. Maybe you are here and this feels like enough. Just tuning into what it is like to voluntarily move into this place of curling in. You're wanting a deeper stretching sensation in this shape. You can start to walk the heels down your mat, allowing your hands on the backs of your thighs to guide the torso with the legs. This might come into like a full forward fold in your body. In my body, I never have this shape. Never say never, but I rarely get this shape where I'm like fully in a forward fold. So no stress there. The intention here is to simply let yourself voluntarily come into this place of restfulness and just notice how it feels after we've done some engagement in that grounding, in that lengthening. I like to think about sending the breath to that space between the shoulder blades. You might even play around here with both that lengthening and collapse coming in, that resting in, by thinking about with every inhale, the crown of the head reaches forward towards the toes. With every exhale, you allow your body to settle into that slightly different shape. We'll be here for about 3 or 4 more breaths. As you're ready, we'll start to make our way out of this shape, starting by releasing the hands from underneath the thighs and just letting them come to your sides to rest on the earth. With every inhale, allow breath to fill into your torso and allow that breath to move your rib cage, move your body with the breath. So it's almost like that breath in is pressing out on the body, creating a slightly different shape. And we'll start with a few breath cycles to come back up to that seat, moving really as slow as feels good. Until you eventually reach a place where your chest is stacked over your hips, head over heart. We'll start to walk the heels back in. If you brought a prop in underneath the knees, you can slide that out of the way. From here, we'll start to roll on over to all fours. If you've got blocks, you can have them at the top of your mat here. You might take them to frame the top of your mat at whatever height feels good. We're just going to take a moment to set ourselves up, bringing hands underneath shoulders, knees underneath hips, pressing into the earth, feeling that ground beneath us to find length into the arms, into the legs, this integrity, this strength that comes from pressing into a solid earth, a solid floor. Other places where you might tap into this sensation or length are reaching the crown of the head forward, the hips back in space. All of these movements can be really micro movements, internally sensed, but maybe not externally seen. So nothing has to be big here. As you're ready, we're going to start to bring the toes slightly together. Knees slightly wider than the torso, coming into a child's pose here. If your hips are floating up here, it's okay. Just think about that action of reaching the hips down towards the heels as you reach the arms forward. Really feeling into that long body. Thinking about the neck being an extension of the spine here. Sometimes we have a tendency to look the head up towards the hands. We really want to be looking towards the ground, still thinking about that crown of the head being pulling in one direction as the hips pull in the other direction. We'll take a couple breaths here. Kind of this pose of both collapse and length. What is it like to have integrity in our rest, integrity in our dorsal activation? And on an inhale, we'll come back into that all fours. Maybe shifting the right hand out of the way. We'll start to step that right foot up between the hands. So I like to lift the right hand so that my leg can kind of swoop around to step up. This is where those blocks might come in handy. We're going to start here from that collapsed space. So letting yourself really drape over that right leg, keeping the knee over the ankle here, letting the head hang. If you do have something to prop the hands up on and that feels good and supportive, option to take that. Otherwise, hands are coming towards the ground as we find this rounding, the slumping into our low lunge. On your next inhale, I want you to just think about reaching the head forward. So nothing else in the spine or body needs to change. Just think about that crown of the head reaching towards the wall in front of you. On that next inhale, we'll start to move the hands towards the top of the thigh here. And just notice what it's like to ground into yourself here, pressing gently into that thigh. Our crown of the head may be slightly more towards that top seam of the room where the wall meets the ceiling. On this next progressive inhale, think about pressing hands into that thigh. That breath in fills the torso, helps you lift chest over hips, head over heart. That crown of the head reaching towards the ceiling here. This may be a lot of work. Know that you're doing work here. And this last inhale, only if you want to, release the arms up towards the ceiling, pressing the feet and that back shin into the earth to find this length up. Know that you can have paused at any of those little stages. You could still be collapsed over that front leg if that's as much as you got in you today. And on this next exhale, we'll meet you there in that collapsed space, allowing yourself with intention to drape over that front leg, allowing the head to hang heavy. We'll take a breath in here. That audible sigh out. We'll start to bring both hands towards the inside step of that right foot. You can wiggle walk the toes out so that they maybe drape over the mat. And then pressing into the hands, pressing into that back shin, we'll bring that right leg back in line with the left. So we're back in our all fours. Start to adjust yourself. So hands are underneath shoulders, knees underneath hips. And I'll bring the toes together, knees wide, and find that child's pose, a space where there's both length and rest and collapse in the body. So the folding forward is that cue of restfulness, and the cue of length is that reaching of the arms, that reaching of the hips in opposite directions. You might even bring a block underneath the forehead if it's floating here, a pillow, a blanket. Three breath cycles here. One more breath in. Breath out to start to lift the head up off the mat or the block. We'll start to shift ourselves forward into our all fours, hands underneath shoulders, knees underneath hips. We'll shift this left hand out of the way and start to step that left foot forward. So we're trying to get 90 degrees in our body here. So 90 degrees in this back knee angle, in this eventual hip angle, or a bunch of squares. Once you find your footing here, allow yourself to drape over the front of that thigh, keeping the knee in line with the ankle here, finding that stability. Hands can be on blocks or elevated here as we allow ourselves just to drape over that front knee. And then just like the other side, which with each inhale, we're going to start to explore a different sense of lengthening, knowing that you can pause at any of these places here. I'm going to start with a big inhale, thinking about the crown of the head lengthening towards the wall, just allowing that cervical spine, that neck to find length. On that next inhale, you can start to migrate the hands towards the thigh, starting to lift the chest slightly off the thigh. The crown of the head now reaches towards that upper seam of the room. On that next inhale, fully press into that thigh, lifting chest over hips, head over heart. Crown of the head is reaching towards the ceiling here. This last little step here, releasing the arms, inhaling, thinking about the pinkies sliding behind the ears as you reach them up high, fully pressing into that front foot, that back thigh. There's almost this squeezing action that happens to ground us as we grow tall. This interaction between lengthening and grounding. And then as you're ready, we'll start to release whatever extent of length that you've gotten to fold back over that thigh. A few breath cycles here. As you're ready, we'll start to bring both hands towards the mat on the inside step of that left foot. We'll wiggle that foot out towards the side to create a little bit of space so that the hands can be underneath the shoulders. Pressing into the hands, pressing into the thighs. Start to release that leg back so it comes in line with the other leg. Start to bring the toes to touch the knees wide. We're coming back into that child's pose. If child's pose is not suiting you, you might even come into a seat, or even laying fully on the belly if it feels okay. Tuning into what your body needs. Whatever shape you end up taking here, whatever restful shape, see if you can feel that comparison of length and rest. That these things aren't necessarily mutually exclusive when we connect to them choicefully. When we're responsive to where our system is at. Two more breaths here. When you're ready, start to lift the head up off the ground. We'll start to come back into that all fours. And this time we're going to step up towards the top of the mat. So you might bring your hands underneath the block or blocks underneath your hands to create a little bit more space for this. We're going to step one foot up and then the other foot up. We're in our forward fold here. Option to just stay here in the forward fold if you're like, this is where I'm at. This is where I'm going to find length. You can think about grounding into the feet, reaching the crown of the head towards the earth. If you're up for getting all the way up, we'll start to inhale. Think about the crown of the head starting to reach towards the wall, or maybe even like that bottom seam of the floor and wall. And then on that next inhale, bring hands towards shins. Start to find a halfway lift where the head is reaching towards the wall. That next inhale, start to fill into the back of the body, reach the head up towards the ceiling, move as slow as you need here, coming into a standing position. When I get here, I like to reconnect with my new grounding. So we've been making a lot of contact on the ground with lots of our body, big portions of our legs, and we've transitioned here to making contact with just our feet. So maybe you play around with rocking, bringing awareness to that grounding here. This is a tool that can really be used whenever you're feeling that kind of like numbing out, is like bringing that attention back down to how you're connected, how you're being here in this moment, in this time. And once you feel that sense of grounding, allow a little bend to come into the knees. And we'll bring the hands towards the heart space. Thumb makes contact with that sternum. Thinking about lengthening the crown towards the ceiling. This might be your balancing posture here. This might be where you want to lengthen, where you want to play around with sensation. That's so okay in this moment. This is a lot of potential work depending on how you're paying attention, right? You're wanting to add a little bit of challenge here. We'll start to shift weight into one foot or the other. I'm going to start with shifting weight into my left foot here. I'm going to come onto my toes of my right foot. So just playing around with lifting the heel up. What is it like to have part of our body supporting us here? You may stay here with this exploration, both feet on the ground, just playing around with lifting the heel of one foot. You want a little bit more, you can come onto the toes of that right foot and start to open the knee out towards the side. This could be your tree pose here. Thinking about how you're lengthening up through that grounded, rooted foot, how that grounding supports you. You might even think about that right hip coming in towards the midline, this tension coming in. If you'd like some more challenge, or you're like, this is too easy, you can start to lift the foot up off the ground and place it on the inner calf or the inner thigh, being safe to not place it on that knee there. Taking 2 more breaths in whatever shape you've taken. As you're ready, we'll exhale, lower both feet down to the ground, and we'll just reconnect with that double rootedness. So I like to pedal through the feet. Maybe you're finding some like little safe ankle rolls here. Bring your attention back down to the feet here. Once you feel secure in that grounding, your attention is down so that your lift can be up. We'll start to take that to the other side. So again, this might just be like an internal, I'm going to stand here and play around with where my pressure is going into my feet. And allow that to be the practice. How do we stay tall and in inner integrity when there's moving ground underneath us, right? If you're wanting to play around with some tree variations, we'll just start by grounding into that right foot. And this time, lifting that left heel up and off the ground, keeping the toes grounded for this first little bit. Thinking about that right hip staying in line. So sometimes we have this tendency to like sass the hip out. We want to keep our support in line. You could play with this lifting of the heel for our whole time here, or maybe you start to come up onto the toes and swivel that left hip out, or left knee out, excuse me. Noticing what it's like to find length here. If you're like, this is not hard enough for me, I need more balance, challenge, you can start to lift the foot off the mat and bring it towards the calf or the inner thigh, staying clear of that knee, knowing that maybe we stumble, maybe we fall, that's okay. Each of our sides are different and need different supports. I don't quite got this side. Taking a moment to play with that sense of grounding and lengthening here. That breath can allow us to think about breath going all the way down to the feet and all the way up to the crown of the head. So there's a dual movement with the breath. And as you're ready, start to release that out. We'll come back to just standing. Starting to take a big breath in. You can reach the arms up and overhead, find length through the entire body. And then as you exhale, bring your hands together, start to bring them in front of the face, in front of the heart. And as you bring the hands forward and release them towards the ground, Your body rolls forward with it, coming back into that forward fold. If you've got those blocks, you can bring them underneath the hands here to bring the floor up to meet you. We'll start to make our way back down, stepping one foot back, lowering a knee, and stepping the other foot back, lowering the knee. From here, we'll start to sit back on our bum, coming all the way onto the back body, allowing whole back side of your body to make contact with the ground. This new orientation to explore length. The feet can rest on the ground, knees pointed towards the ceiling. And from here, we'll take the right knee in towards the chest, give it a little bit of a squeeze. Maybe you roll through the ankle. Then when you're ready, we'll start to cross that shin over the opposite thigh, creating a little figure four here. This might be enough for you today. This might be where you land. If you're craving a little bit more of a stretch through the back of the leg, we can start to bring this whole configuration in towards the chest and your mouth. You might even take your hands, threading one through that little four hole that exists, the other around the outside to interlace behind the thigh or on top of the shin. Thinking about that breath lengthening from the hips all the way to the crown as we find this little figure four stretch, a reclined pigeon. And that next breath out will allow the feet to come back down to make contact with the mat. We'll start to bring a hand towards that right knee, the other hand towards the outer edge of that right foot to lift it off, and then release the hand from the foot to rotate that configuration back towards the ground. Then we'll take it to the other side, starting by bringing that left knee in towards the chest. Maybe you bring the hands towards the top of the shin here, taking a couple moments to feel just that hip compression here. And then as you feel ready, maybe you start to rotate that shin so that you can bring opposite ankle towards opposite thigh. This could be plenty, keeping that foot grounded. If you're seeking a different sensation, a different experience, you can start to bring that configuration in towards the chest, threading the hands around the outer edge and through that little four hole to grab for the back of the thigh or the calf or the shin, excuse me. Connecting with that inhale and that exhale. And then as you're ready, releasing that foot back towards the ground. If you brought the configuration in towards the body, you can bring the hand towards the knee and the side of the foot to gently support, lifting it off the thigh and then releasing it as it rotates back down towards the earth. From here, we'll start to roll over onto our left side, allowing that bottom arm to become like a little pillow. Taking a moment in this fetal position, intentionally finding a supportive amount of curling in. A breath or two here. The knees can slide up to be in line with the hips so that they're parallel, allowing the bottoms of the legs to be kind of at a 90-degree angle to the top of the thighs, the torso a 90-degree angle to the top of the thighs. Again, we're a bunch of squares here. And when you're ready, you can start to lift the head up off the arm, bringing that in line with the rest of the spine. You can bring the left arm out towards the side. And I want you to take the right arm, stack it on top of the left, and on a big inhale, like you're opening up like a book, reach the right arm up and over any and up. You might come into this full supine twist where your torso is fully twisted up towards the ceiling. Or you may be here. You might be like, I don't want to open up all the way. I just want to find this much of an opening or this much of an opening. So listening to yourself here. Taking a breath or two here. On this next exhale, bringing the hands back together, closing off. And then we're going to take the right hand and support ourselves in rolling back through center. And we'll take that to the other side. The right arm comes out to the side, the knees roll over towards that side. Our upper arm can be a little pillow for our head. The knees again are coming out from the hips, creating this parallel line in the thighs, perpendicular line of the torso, perpendicular line of the shins. And when you start to feel ready to explore that slight opening, that slight twist, you can start to lift the head up off the arm, slide that right arm out towards the side, stack the left hand on top, allow the head to rest down, maybe on a pillow or towards the mat. And on a big inhale, start to open up any amount. And again, you could be here, and this could be your opening. Your opening could just be reaching towards the ceiling, or maybe you reach towards that opposite side of the space. Finding a twist that suits you in this moment. Big breath in. Big breath out. Take one more round of breath here. And when you feel ready, we'll start to close that back off, coming into our little fetal position here. You can bring that arm back underneath the head. The next shape that we take is going to be our final resting shape for our practice today. And I want to encourage you to not just rush into Shavasana, to laying on your back in that more traditional pose, but really listening to yourself to see, like, what is a restful position for you now? Maybe you want to stay here in this little fetal position, curled up on your mat. Maybe it feels more restful to come back into that seat from the beginning of our practice. Maybe you're craving another forward fold or another curling inward of some sort to signify your restful state. Or maybe you roll back onto the back body. Allow the legs to grow long, the toes to open towards the sides, and the arms to rest at the sides. Maybe the hands rest on the body somewhere. The most important thing in these last few minutes of our practice is that you find a shape, an orientation for your body that feels restful, that you feel safe in. Option to keep the eyes open here and just orient to your space. Or option to let them soften and close and notice how your nervous system responds. One of the benefits here of having our practice in this platform is that you get to choose when you feel done with your practice. So maybe just that little moment of rest was what you needed, what you can tolerate. Maybe halfway through this point in time, you'd be like, okay, I'm done. Know that you can end your practice from this point on at any point. If you tend to like a longer resting at the end of your practice, know that I will cue you when we're done. Allow the first movement that returns to your body to be a full breath in, and that full breath out, whatever that means for you. And then from that movement of the breath, we'll start to move those furthest little extremities, the fingers and the toes, Just really gentle, waking up and coming back. Allow those small little movements of the fingers and the toes to travel up through the limbs, through the wrists and the ankles, knees and the elbows, the shoulders, the hips, all the way into the rib cage and the torso, the neck and the head. Following your intuitive movement here to reawaken. Once you feel like you've cultivated sufficient movement, we'll start to bring that movement to a pause. The knees can float towards the chest. We'll gently rock over towards one side, coming into that fetal position. If you were laying down, if you're in a seat, you may stay there. If you're in the fetal position, we've met you here. Taking a moment here for gratitude, to thank yourself for coming to your practice, for honoring your needs, finding your grounding, where you can lengthen and find integrity. And then as you're ready, you can use that opposite hand to gently support pressing up into that seat, meeting those others who maybe are in a seat. Bring my hands to the heart space, and we'll end today's practice with a communal breath, beginning by exhaling the stale air in our lungs. Taking a breath in through the nose, filling up, and an audible sigh out. Light and love in me sees the light and love in you, and together we become stronger, we become brighter. Together we bow forward to say thank you. Thank you for practicing with me today. And I hope that this supports you. Next week we'll be streaming at the same time. And we'll start to build on these ideas that we've started today. So today we were focused on tending to that collapse that can happen when we experience prolonged stress, and how we can encourage ourselves, our nervous system, to start to shift out of that collapsed state through grounding and lengthening. Next week, we'll start to play with this idea of widening and boundaries to build on our practice today. Thank you so much for being here with me, and I'll see you next week.